SNAICC advises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that the following episode of Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns contains references to topics that may be triggering to the community. Your social and emotional safety is important. If this recording has brought up any concerns for you, please contact 13Yarn on 139276.
Wada, I'm Catherine Little and welcome to this episode of Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns, a podcast where we celebrate our ways, our stories and of course our children. We begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connections to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and to elders past, present and emerging. For this episode, we're honoured to share a yarn with two highly respected elders and influential community leaders, Aunty Norma Ingram and Aunty Margret Campbell. Aunty Norma is a Wiradjuri woman and she was the first administrator of the groundbreaking Murawina preschool on Gadigal country in Redfern. Aunty Margret is a Dungari and Jerrinji woman and was part of the first Redfern voice of Aboriginal women that supported Murawina. Hosted by Wajak Noongar woman Narelda Jacobs, this episode was recorded on the traditional lands of the Jagera and Turrbal peoples in Meanjin during the 2025 SNAICC conference. The three yarn about the activism that established Murawina, the power of humour that can be used to overcome trauma, and a shared lifelong mission to instil belonging and culture in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. Listen with us as Aunty Norma and Aunty Margret share their wisdom.
Aunty Norma is a proud Wiradjuri woman and has dedicated her life to Aboriginal education and politics. Aunty Norma was the first administrator at Murawina, a preschool for Aboriginal children in Redfern that was established in 1973. Aunty Norma is the first Aboriginal graduate from Harvard with a Masters in Education. Deadly, right? So Aunty Norma has held leadership roles in Aboriginal land councils and government projects. Aunty Norma is a chairperson at Wayanga Elders Program and emphasises passing Aboriginal stories to future generations. I'm also proud to say that Aunty Norma has been a prominent elder in my family's life. Bless. So Aunty Margret Campbell is a Dungari Jerrinji elder and also started at Murawina in 1974 and brought along her two sons as the bus driver and cultural teacher. Aunty Margret became a teacher and was the Murawina director in 1979, with the centre having 60 places. Aunty Margret has held executive roles on the New South Wales AECG, has been a TAFE teacher, a head teacher at colleges of advanced education and at Sydney University. Aunty Margret supported... I haven't finished. The list just goes on. So Aunty Margret supported Tranby College to attain their RTO status in 1995. Aunty Margret is still educating and teaching culture via her own business, the Rocks Aboriginal Dreaming Tour in the Rocks in Sydney. I'll hand over to Narelda, and I hope you enjoy listening to the wisdom and knowledge that Aunty Norma and Aunty Margret are sharing with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Thank you. We are in the presence of greatness. You both are living just extraordinary lives and giving back to mob. Have you ever done comedy though? Because it strikes me
every day.
This is going to be a very entertaining session. I can already feel it. Is that important actually to use humour or to bring the light into every room that you walk into?
Absolutely. I mean, this is who we are as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I think that humour, we have to have that sense of humour because it's within us. It's part of our culture, and it just helps us go through what we go through every day. Because what we go through every day, and the plenary session this morning with Jack, and it was just fantastic. Yeah. And the stories that we, have to go through. So the humour comes with us.
Aunty Margret, who makes people laugh more, you or Aunty Norma?
I don't know about that. I mean, I was known, Jack Beetson will testify to this, I was known as Sergeant Major at the as the senior head teacher at Tranby Aboriginal College in those days. And but one of the things I pride myself in is being around a mob who can laugh at ourselves. We can laugh at our traumas in some way, and all our hardships. And if we don't have a little sort of a joke about that, you get the trauma creeps in there all the time.
What are your reflections of the conference?
Of the what?
Of this conference, the last few days.
Look, I just want to congratulate the SNAICC family, the organisers. I think they've done fantastically well. All of the sessions I've been able to go, to the plenaries. I've been able to go to a lot of the workshops, and they've just been fabulous. For me, I guess, though, just listening to those stories, and we've been going to conferences, since we were about in our 20s, a couple of years ago. And you hear the traumas, and that's why we talked about all our sense of humour and the comedy is so important for us. It's really good to hear that we're moving forward. But who said it? It has to be the Aboriginal KPIs, Jack, is that right? It has to be on the Aboriginal KPIs, not government, not the white systems KPIs that we're moving forward, because government, we can ask government for funding and they'll say, but, you've got to address this, you've got to address this, you've got to address this, which is all the gubba stuff. And, for me, we're moving forward is when we can do it in the Koori way. I'm New South Wales. The Koori way, and we do our Koori KPIs to do it that way. That's what I can see where we're moving along successfully.
Can you take us back to a few days ago, 1973? What was happening in 1973 that made you want to start what would become a movement, I guess?
Well, women would soon just stay at home and mind the kids and do the child rearing, do the housework, do the cooking and the kitchen and the cleaning, and be there and greet the hubby when he got home. And that wasn't us at all. We were the opposite. I mean, fairness, we didn't actually reverse that role, but at one point in time it was obvious that we had to keep moving forward. And obviously, seeing the humour in all of that, if we weren't able to do that, it could have caused all sorts of other complications. But Murawina, in the heart of the invasion zone, and I describe it as the invasion zone because we still live with that story in Redfern, Sydney. And we were supposed to be deculturised and didn't have any kinship systems and all that, so we had to change that. And Murawina, I mean, she called me. We've known each other since we were 14, I think, something like that. And she said, my bus driver ain't turning up here. Can you come and do the bus driving? I said, oh, okay. And I brought the kids along. And I got stuck with her ever since. I couldn't sort of go my way after we all got married, etc. So I came in, and then at one point in time we were starting to plan an early childhood centre. And this is a time when the education movement was happening. The voices of Aboriginal education were saying, early childhood, really, is that a thing? And, of course, we made that very clear it was a thing. The only distinction I have today in terms of carrying that message is it's from the women's business point of view. It's 0 to 11 chronologically years of age because the whole obvious physical aspects of all that. But we're getting there, I suppose, in changing that labelling in the early learning sectors generally. But in Redfern, we were labelled as having no culture. And the Murawina Centre that I was invited to go down, we were on a little place called Sheppard Street, and we had a concrete footpath. And because of the bus driver, I had to take them up to the local parks and drive them and walk them around there and keep some sanity about, well, this is real. This is the real trees in Sydney. They're not in the pot plants. And do the cultural teaching in that context to reground the kids that there is an environment beyond the building and tar and concrete and cement. So that was what our reproduction was, to try and get our kids in the cities to reconnect with country story.
What was your motivation to babysit them or to teach them?
We were teaching them from that very early stage. They were touchy-feeling and they could actually deal with from a curriculum point of view. We broke rules and all and say that kids are at their height in their learning between the ages of 0 to 11. And we were dealing with 0 to 8, but yeah, that's what we changed. And the education group, the voice, was impact on that, because that was what the policy was all about. So
you're talking about 1973, but I'd like to go back, and it's been great talking to some of the young people here, and we've been sharing our story with some of the young people who, I think, because they were moving forward like this, I think they were interested in what we were talking about. But I'm Wiradjuri, and I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this wonderful land that we're on today. So I'm in West New South Wales. And I was born and raised on the Aboriginal reserve called Urambi under what was known as the Aboriginal Welfare Act. So our lives was totally controlled by the New South Wales state government under what was known as the mission manager. We weren't allowed to go into town unless it was for the doctors. We weren't allowed to go to school. My older sister, I'm the youngest of 11 children, my older sister, she was one of the first Aboriginal children that was allowed to go into the white school in town. This is not that long ago. It's not sort of 200 years ago. This is quite recent in our lifetime. We weren't allowed to speak our language. We weren't allowed to be educated. We weren't allowed to practice culture. As a matter of fact, I tell people the story. I learned to read and write at Sunday school because all of the missionaries came up there to all of our mission stations, I think, and they wanted to Christianise us, take away the Aboriginal culture and Christianise us. And so I'm a descendant of a man by the name of Windradyne of the Wiradjuri, who fought against Captain Arthur Phillip, who came over the Blue Mountains to my country. And he fought against all of that. And so my parents were fighting for Aboriginal citizens' rights in 1938. My parents came down from Urambi and they were living in Redfern for a little while, and they were going back and forth and back and forth. And so and they said, Norma, you're a little bit radical. Yeah, funny that, eh? Funny that. And it will never go out of us. It's there. We'll continue to fight. And I think what the younger generation, if they don't know that history of what happened to our people by government, we're not blaming individual people here. We're blaming the government policies that was set up and was used against us we know what happened when Captain Arthur Phillip came in. We know with our lovely Koiki Mambo that, native title, that it was terra nullius, that this country was founded on. As a kid, I always said, how come that little tiny island up there called England, and they came over here and they put the flag down in New Circular Quay and they owned the whole of Australia? I couldn't work that out as a kid. It was just amazing to me.
Even as a kid. In fact, you've got claim over that 1938 photo, that iconic photo. Can you explain your connection to that?
Well, that's when we were fighting. My parents were fighting for Aboriginal citizens' rights, and a lot of Aboriginal people were fighting for Aboriginal citizens' rights. And so those stories are just important too, of the people who fought for that, because we weren't counted as citizens in this country until 1967 with the referendum, where we had to go to the whole of Australia and say, please, 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 can you people vote yes so we can be counted as citizens in this country? Sorry, I get a little bit naughty about that stuff, but I just find it absolutely disgraceful that we have to go to the whole of Australia and say, please, can you vote yes? Tick that yes box. And I've been a part of the recent referendum as well. So that photo was in Elizabeth Street in Redfern. In the city, in Central, and it was about our people who were fighting for Aboriginal citizens' rights. My mother, if you know the photograph, and I'm sorry we don't have it up here, but there's a lady on the right-hand side with the hat on, 1938. That was my mother, and she was nursing my older sister, Olive, and then at the front was my sister Esther and my two brothers, Philip and Isaac. And some of you may be listening to Joey Williams this morning. That little boy in the front was his great-great-grandfather, and the lady behind was his great-great-grandmother. And so there's a lot of people who've been fighting in this country for Aboriginal citizens' rights, for our cultural rights, for our rights as the first peoples of this country. It's been going on since Captain Arthur Phillip brought those big ships in, right from the start. You may have heard of Pemulwuy. Well, my ancestor, Windradine, was one of those. And we continue to fight today. What I see today at this conference is that we're still fighting. We're still telling the stories. I mean, that's Aboriginal culture, surely. Telling stories in so many different ways, in our storytelling, our songs, our dances, our artwork. That's all storytelling, and it's the way that we do it, and we continue to do that. When is this country going to stop and listen to us and say, we gave them the answers, we gave them all of those details at the recent referendum that I had a lot to do with. We were saying, okay, we are not the problem. We are giving you the answers. You want to listen to us or not? Do you want to make it because you will continue to go on and do this? We'll continue to have these conferences. I mean, I love the conference, absolutely. But we'll continue to have to do that while ever this Australia does not listen to us.
That cultural expression, the stories and the dances and, and living and breathing your culture, that's part of learning as well. And you mentioned, not wanting to hit the Western ideas of KPIs, but that also applied to the curriculum or the way that you would teach the children at Murawina. What's the...
Yeah, I'll just say that and then I'll let Margaret answer that.
What's your theory there?
Yeah, when we started Murawina, we had a constitution that said only Aboriginal women could be members of our organisation. We got away with it. And that meant that only our Aboriginal women could become board of directors. And so in our organisation, Murawina, we had our grandmothers. My mother was one of them. The ladies, they were a part of our board of directors with some of the younger ones. I was the CEO, and they guided us. They were there, and it was the first early childhood learning that I think that we said now. All of the teachers are auntie, and we had a bus driver and his uncle. We had one male, kind of, token. Sorry about that, guys. But
she's disgusting.
We developed, I'll get Margaret to talk about this, because before that we had preschools, it was known as, on the reserves, Aboriginal reserves, that was run by the Save the Children Fund, which was the English, Princess Anne, she was what do you call it? Patron. Anyway, so they had all their Save the Children Fund preschools on the reserves. And so we were the very first fully run totally run for Aboriginal kids by Aboriginal women. So we none of us were trained in that sort of way, but there was nothing there for us. We developed all of the curriculum our way, by ourselves. We didn't have any toys or anything. And I'll get Margaret to talk about all of that because she was our teacher.
And you made sure it was free.
Absolutely. When we started it was free because I remember my children were small and I was thinking, oh God, I have to go to work. But for me to send my two children, I had two at the time, for me to send my two children, I would have had to go to one of those nurseries and pay something like $50 a week. So if I was earning $200 a week, that's it. I'd have to pay these white people to take care of my kids. So I said, no, we're going to set up our own and we're not going to charge because the government needs to pay for that.
All right, Aunty Margret, take it away.
Your breath, Norma.
I try.
And that's how it came about. Young mums had, we were looking to go to work and help hubbies pay the rent and the food and in Sydney. And that's how we found our place to be able to teach the kids in a formal way. The education process was about understanding. I mean, I loved some of the sessions this morning about finding your belonging and your gravity, belonging in the city landscape, the tar and concrete and cement. If you didn't find where the trees were in the parkland areas, what was living in the trees, around the trees, in the circle, in terms of environmental knowledge, you don't know where you belong. Because the city was so dominant in the context of that. The sun still rises and the kids didn't know why we were marching with the flags, the red, black and yellow flags. And I used to say to them, well, hang on, there's the moon up there too as well. So these environmental factors was when kids had to be grounded in that to find out what it was all about. So your belonging encompasses the environment. So to teach that in a city skyscape was very challenging for us, but we had to take them to the park on a daily basis to keep grounded about it, because the seasons are still turning over in the city parks. And that's how I managed to teach it into curriculum. This is your belonging. This is why, matter of fact, if I was to ask anybody here, and I normally do this when I'm teaching this, do you know what tree is seeding? Young girl over here, what's your name? With your hands folded, you're looking very serious there. Well, Mary, I promise you, there's a big tall canopy tree with a lot of ground shrubs, and in the environment or out in the bush in the remote area, the seed of life is basically how we women in the women's business would say, hang on, she was born at a time when that seed's there, we'll belong her with that seed of life. And the whole eco-environmental system becomes your whole agricultural farming patch, all this way. So it's a simple early childhood context that we, through the ACG forums, the Education Policy Advisory Voices, said to them, if you don't include that in the beginning, and we were advocating to say this knowledge and this curriculum context must be compulsory. And today, when I'm hearing sessions, I'm still not hearing that. We're still fighting, as Norma says, to get this as the basic right for any Aboriginal person, whether you're in university or whatever, to find this is what you belong with, because this is not a fake civilization. This environment is real for us out there, and if our kids don't know the belonging connection to that, it's going to happen.
Thinking that I was talking to Margaret earlier about, we said when we set up Murawina, we had to go to council to get it approved and all of that stuff in Redfern, downtown Redfern, and we talked to people and non-Aboriginal people would say to us, but you're sending your children to an all-Aboriginal preschool. How are they going to get on when they go to the big school? They're going to fail, aren't they? So just listening to the plenary this morning, they're going to fail. Yeah. Why are you seeing them? You're segregating them. These little babies, little Aboriginal babies. They will fail when they go to the big school.
But they were the most literate and numerate kids by the time they got into the kindergarten and first class classes because of the pre-literacy and pre-numeracy that we were encouraging them and showing them where the literacy was in the landscape, in that environment that we were exposing them to. And then tell them the story about that, and then the story, what's in the meaning of the story. Why is the little possum up the tree, and relating that whole context to it then, and why? Because most people would say you can't eat that, and we would explain why they couldn't eat it. Because it's not your totem, that's a white fella's story. Good story, it suits them. But it's one of your family members within the ecosystem. And that relates back to land rights and eco and agricultural practices. And we were doing that in a little basic story way, grooming and nurturing our next politicians.
Wow,
Some of them are here, actually.
Talk about instilling a sense of belonging and an identity and being a part of something bigger, which is so important for little kids. To understand that they're already born with purpose, and the purpose is to look after country. That's all around us. I think that is just so stunningly beautiful. Aunty Margret, did your teacher training come in useful at all? Like you were in the first wave of teachers to graduate university.
To be correct, I was the first one that openly identified as being an Aboriginal, Dungari Guri. And there were people there that weren't identifying because they didn't feel safe. And this is as recently as what Norma's talking about, the 60s and 70s. People didn't feel safe in Sydney to identify as that. So in all fairness to them, they were there. But I was the first one to openly identify that. And Val Weldon and I were the two elder ones that went in there to make a difference and really challenge them about early childhood and our way of rearing children in the natural environment.
Has teacher training changed over the years, would you say?
No. You might have one or two or three extra Aboriginal staff or Torres Islander staff there, but they're still being dominated by the mainstream methodology of child rearing. And you've only got to just look at the recent outbursts in terms of what they're doing in molestation and a whole range of stuff there. That's a big reflection on what is generally going around and the lack of safety, not to mention the curriculum and the content of what an Aboriginal person's all about, a Torres Islander person's all about.
What are your thoughts then when you do hear childcare centres in the headlines? I mean, do you think there is a link there between people making money off kids being in childcare centres?
Of course it is, and that's a classic example of it all, because we're on about free. It was our right as an early childhood specialist to be able to have the freedom to learn who you are and what you belong to, where you come from, and how that fits into a modern landscape today. Because the land is still there, it's still breathing. As I mentioned, the sun's still rising, the waterways are still there. They need to connect to that belonging. So putting it into curriculum, it's often lost in not just the school curriculums, but the early childhood, but also the adult university. And I'm talking about how a lecturer will say, let's plan one excursion this term, because we've got no money to go out and find about. And I find that when teacher and trainings come on my walkabout tour, because I'm still dealing with that, I designed to take my classroom out and walk about on the land and describe what that's all about. And even teachers will come and say, why aren't we getting this in our curriculum? I said, well, why aren't you? And that's what it's all about, because kids, if you're teaching kids in the early childhood sector, they've got to be able to see the reality of that rather than the fake. Books are okay, Joe mentioned today. Books are okay, but that's a fake version of the reality which is out in the playground.
Aunty Norma, what are your thoughts about the state of? I know we're heading into early learning, but some centres are still childcare centres and not providing the education. So, what do you think is the state?
I still teach. Believe it or not, I teach a part-time. Thank goodness I can pick and choose now. I teach part-time at TAFE, so my background is English and history, secondary teaching. And I just still totally believe, I'm not talking about anybody in this room, but I still totally believe that we as an Aboriginal peoples and our culture is not valued by this country, by the general population. We are still not valued. Even though we've been here for 65,000 years, white man's terms, we've been here, since the dream time. Even though we've been here, even though we've been showing, as I said, I've been teaching for 40 years. I'm still teaching, they call it Aboriginal studies, Aboriginal culture. I don't teach Aboriginal culture, but I talk about it, and most of my students are non-Aboriginal, and I ask them things like, tell me about your family. They will talk about their partner. They will talk about their children. They might even talk about their parents. And they talk about their fur babies, and that's it. And so when I put up about the Aboriginal kinship system, because I do that a lot, and they go, oh. And it's not just human beings as part of our kinship system. It's everything that Margaret's been talking about. All of that's our family. My totem is the Goanna, the Girawal. So, that's either my auntie or my uncle or my brother or sister, so we have to protect each other. The white Australia does not know that, and we could see that in the last referendum. As I said, I was a major part of all of that as well. Why they voted no, because we're not valued. We had the answers. We said, here's the answer for you. We are not the problem, but we can help you out. And so this is not valued. And so when you see our babies in those childcare centres, and I was also part of setting up the Aboriginal Children's Service in Redfern, and we were there at the beginning when SNAICC was established. And so we've been there, and we can see that our people, our culture, our babies are still not valued by this society.
Yeah. That's why they're still taking them away.
Yeah. You were quite strategic in where Murawina was located. Can you talk us through why where it was and why?
Yeah, well, some of you may have read about the Black Panthers in America, where they had a breakfast program. And so we had some Aboriginal people who went over there. I think Bob Mazza was one of those people who went over there. When they came back, they talked to us about, we was at the Foundation for Aboriginal Affairs, and then we went down and set up the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. So when they came back, we were all talking, there was a lot of men, and I don't know why they still just talk about the Aboriginal men and not the Aboriginal women who were part of all of that. And so the men came back and said, we'll set up the Aboriginal Legal Service. We'll set up the Aboriginal Medical Service. you women, you go and set up Murawina and you set up the Aboriginal Children's Service, because that's where you belong. So that's what they said to us. And we were lucky enough that we had a building that was in Chippendale, which is next suburb to Redfern. And he furnished this building for us. He said, do you want this building? And we said, yeah, of course, we'll take it. You know, it was for nothing.
Not to own it.
It was for free. So they said, but it was, all we had was this building about as big as this room here. And then there was a footpath, which is about as big as this stage here. And so we're able to run our programs, the breakfast program there, and then we developed that into Murawina to the preschool. That's why Margaret and Mary Lou had to put them in the bus. And I said, we need our own bus drivers. Okay, Margaret and Mary Lou, go out and get your bus driver's licence. I told them what to do all the time. I don't know if they listened to me or not, but
That's why we call her the fairy godmother, Ginderella. Ginderella. She bossed us around. We were the two fuglies, and she was the Ginderella. We developed a little play about it, actually. Again, we have to laugh at ourselves, and that's what I'm saying. Kept us sane, yeah. So she's Ginderella.
What were the men of Redfern doing at that time?
they were beating their chests.
Yeah.
And then here you come along with, would you say, humble beginnings that then grew into something?
Oh, you know what, Narelda? I think it's that we saw there was a need. We saw there was an opportunity, so we just did it. We just went and did it.
Was it celebrated then, or are you feeling that it's, as people look back, it's like it's considered groundbreaking and worthy of celebration?
Well, we were prepping them for what's what Jack was talking about, the pre-literacy, the living language with the aunties around the community. The literacy was evolving through that, and the numeracy was evolving around that. So we prepared them to go to school. And when they did go into school, you could see that it wasn't an alien language to them, because we were prepping them there in terms of how we were dealing it. And rather than use the little, the total book form of literacy numbers, we were taking them out on the land to let them know how they were grounded to belonging to that literacy.
So
I don't think we knew what we were doing. I think we just went ahead and did it. We're mothers. We've got that maternal instinct, so we just went and did it. And we certainly didn't realise, what it would morph into, like SNAICC. Look at this is fabulous. We were there in the early days when it was first set up, but look at it now. Yeah.
Until recently, the government, families who were sending their children into childcare centres could only be subsidised if they were going to work or going to study. These are the parents. And that activity test has only now just been removed. So 3 days a week, anyone can get subsidised childcare, even if they're just going home or going shopping or anything, because it's now considered early learning. So what were the mums doing when they would drop off what were the mothers doing?
Well, they were going into training. They were going to training as the education portfolio was opening up, and into the workforce. And they could drop them, and so much so we ended up building on top of the new building where we had the 60 Place Centre from that little street play group to a 60 Place Centre just near Redfern Station. And on the top of it was a hostel for young mums who were pregnant, and they could just drop the kids downstairs and go off, and we were facilitating the training into that. So that's how that whole thing. And Norma mentioned, she just surfaced over there, that everything was about the men. The men were doing this, the men were doing that, and we'd often say, hang on, where do we fit into this? So that's part of what we had to do to facilitate those next generations to be ready for that.
So that was in the block?
That was on the block.
On the block.
On the block.
So you created that sense of community that the block was famous for.
It was visible, it was real.
We had the Aboriginal Housing Company there at the time, and we just got our building, which was really interesting. I'm walking up Everly Street, and there was a block of land there, and I said, we could use this for our preschool. Yeah. And so I went to DAA, as it was at the time, Department of Aboriginal Affairs. I said, there's a block of land here. We were very poor. We didn't have any money, by the way. And I said, there's a block of land here. Can we buy it? And first of all, they said no to us. And then they said, well, if you get half the money, we'll give you the other half. Certainly expecting us not to get the money because we were broke, didn't have any money. And I got the money. So they had they had to give us the money to build that building on the block in Everly Street.
And just one of the little quick stories on that. I mean, one of the things we did was we collected all the big cockroaches live from the building that we were having to spray out every day to bring the children in for the play groups, and we took them over in the bus that I was driving and made sure we released them in the DAA offices. And, you know, to make our point, if you're expecting us to live and work with this with our children of the next generations, well, you may as well join us and live with us. And
It's
work
like,
with us
don't mess with us, people.
But we did little humorous things like that. You know, it's all about humour. If we didn't see the funny side of it all, you'd go stressed.
Can we spend the last few moments talking about funding? You're quite good at going and asking for funding to keep programs. How many times would you say you've had to go and meet with people to keep programs alive?
I think, like, there's two places that I've been a part of it, Margaret's been part of as well. I'm not going to talk about it for her, but we set up Murawina from nothing. And then we are now with the Wyanga, the Aboriginal Elders Program. So we started from nothing again. So we were from preschool, early childcare, to the Elders Program. So I'm currently the chair of Wyanga. Again, what I bring back is that we are not valued. We're not valued by the government. We are not valued. And when we do apply for funding, it's always this. The government says to us, this is our criteria. You have to fit in this criteria for funding. So, for example, with Wyanga at the moment, we do get it's home care. So it's about looking after our elders and making sure they're okay in their own homes. So the federal government fund us, and they only fund us for certain things. So if we want to do anything else with our elders, like take them on excursions or anything like that, if there's any extras, we have to pay that money ourselves. There are strict criteria around that. We go, and what my meetings have been with federal government is that we've been going from Wyanga since 1996. We must know we're still there, and we've grown, so we must know what we're doing. We must know, so that they're still not listening to us. So I said, you have to recognise us, because we've been doing this for a long time. You have to recognise us as being, for example, specialists in the area, because we know that, can I just talk about black cladding? And the idea of black cladding is that there are non-Aboriginal people, organisations, who get funding to provide services because they say that they've got Aboriginal people in their organisations, so they tick the box. If you're a fully run Aboriginal organisation like we are, all of our clients are Aboriginal, they don't fund us where they'll fund these other organisations.
So just like you were doing early learning, you were already promoting independent living before that became a thing that the government was then focused on, because that's only just in recent times that they're focusing on keeping elders at home to live independently, and Wyanga has been doing that since the 90s. Well,
it started with Murawina, because part of my bus driving when I collected all the children was to go then get all the grannies and bring them in, so that whole relationship building was there. We're doing the same thing there now with the Wyanga elders at Southern Bookend, where we actually ended up, just naturally proceeding into that area.
And part of the service that you provide is that that daytime connection, because they come together, the elders come together and spend the day together, and then they go back to their home.
But otherwise, they're in their dispersed homes, with the home care coming in, but they're living there mostly unless the families are there. So we just bring them together on a daily basis in terms of the community aspects of what we're doing. And I'm, as a spin-off of that, she always gives me the jobs to do. When we were talking about during the COVID period, and what are we going to be doing? And someone talked, but we should be doing this on a regular basis. And the residential concept came up. And have a guess who's got to do that job? She said, can you go get the land, Margaret, to build a 60-place or 55 single-bedroom homes here in Sydney on Olympic Park? And that's what I'm working on at the moment. But that's what it's all about at the moment, in addition to whatever else I do. But apart from all that, that's what it's always about, is bringing the elders and the kids together, and that's where early childhood's got to maintain that belonging connection with what the adults, not just adults, the family and the communal, the aunties and the other grannies. I mean, I grew up with seven biological mothers and 6 biological fathers, and I'm talking about my dad's brothers and sisters, mum's brothers and sisters. That's family. And when you're dealing with early childhood, the curriculum, we're talking about that, they're still saying that the biological mum and the dad in the little nuclear family were one child and, a dog named Digger, maybe. They're still teaching that kind of stuff there. So it's a different concept of early childhood about what families are now role modelling to ground our young kids in the early sector. This is what you belong to.
All right, 30 seconds left for each of you. What would you like to leave your audience with?
I will say, folks, because I still do Welcome to Country in Redfern, and when I talk to people, I say, if you are lucky enough to have parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, respectfully, in Jamara in my language, sit by their chairs and say, Nan, Pop, tell me your story. Yeah. And the other side of it is that, Nan, Pop, can you just please pass on your stories to this next generations?
And
Aunty Margret.
And part of what I do in my little quick story is you've got to teach them about that belonging, about what they belong with in terms of the eco-environment. And it's simple. You can't talk about your totem without saying, well, where does that totem, if it's a kookaburra, if it's a cockatoo, whatever, what that lives in. So the whole ecosystem is about belonging and showing to the kids that it's here in the city, it's out there and remote, it's out there, and touch base and tell the story. Get them connected to those stories and go and connect yourselves, for want of a better description, because when you're doing the dual learning with them, that empowers them even more.
I'm going to do one of your tours, Aunty Margret. We all need to when we're on Gadigal country. Please give them a big round of applause.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Kids Culture Community. A big thank you to Aunty Norma and Aunty Margret for generously sharing their knowledge, stories and laughter with us. As we close, we again acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters across Australia and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. If this episode resonated with you, help us continue to amplify Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices by following and sharing this podcast episode. You can find all episodes, transcripts and additional resources on the SNAICC website or watch full episodes on our YouTube channel. And if you've got a story to share or topics you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. As we wrap up this episode, let's carry forward Aunty Margret's reminder that our ultimate act of love is passing our knowledge to our children. Until next time, look after one another.